I have been waiting to have this man on Meet the Biz for a while now. I mean, he has created classics and worked on films that are some of my top favorites of all time. He is an American film and television director, producer, screenwriter, actor, author. He's a film teacher. I'll just list a few of his credits. Gods and Monsters, Dante's Cove, Guilty as Charged, and Elvira's Haunted Hills. Sam Irvin.
Hey, I'm so glad to be here on your show. Thanks for having me.
Oh my God! Thank you for being here. I have to say I love your first name. We have something in common because my middle name is Sam. So.
Oh wow, that's so cool.
You know.
Well, I grew up in North Carolina.
Yeah.
A long time ago, and when I was a teenager, there was a very famous senator named Sam Irvin. From North Carolina, and he headed up the whole Watergate Commission. So for people old enough, he was a very famous guy back then. And he did spell his last name E-R-V-I-N, and mine's I-R-V-I-N. But I'm a junior, so my dad is also a Sam Irvin. And let me tell you, anytime we called up a restaurant and made a reservation for Sam Irvin, we purposely did not spell the name for them. And we would always get the best table.
I love it. Now, and have people come up to you and said, Sam, nice to meet you.
Well, and we actually, when he came through town at one point, my dad, we arranged to get a photograph with him in the newspaper. It was like, well, the real Sam Irvins, please stand up.
I love that. I love that. So, so you grew up in the cinemas. I mean,
yes.
Your grandfather had a chain of cinemas. And your father owned some.
Yes, my grandfather was actually a district manager for a big chain of movie theaters, and he was the district manager for the Southeast and the Carolinas and Georgia and all of that. And my dad owned a competing chain of theaters in North and South Carolina. They had about 26 theaters. And so, yeah, my playground was going to the movie theater and hanging out in the projection booth and collecting the posters as soon as they were done with them. And like the little kid in Cinema Paradiso, that was my childhood and my playground. So it was pretty astonishing. And my parents were very lax about letting me see whatever I wanted to see from the youngest age. And I had two older sisters, and when they would babysit me, they would take me to the movies. And I started seeing, really scary Vincent Price movies and Hammer films and things of that nature, back in the early 60s. I was born in 56. So by the time I was maybe 5 or 6 years old, I was being, exposed to all these incredible movies, which completely, just affected me in a fantastic way, because I was at such an impressionable age. It's what really, made me be such a movie fan, and a particularly horror movie fan. And it was all fantastic. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no. What I was going to say, what's so amazing too, is I read that, you grew up loving these actors, the kind of film, and then you got to interview so many of them.
Yes. Well, actually, the first really important thing that happened is that when I was 8 years old in 1964, my dad took us all on a cross-country trip in the car to go to California and, to go to Disneyland. There wasn't even a Disney World back then.
Right.
We couldn't even go to Florida. We had to go all the way to California to do the Disney thing. And then he managed, because of his connections in the movie business, to get a VIP tour at Warner Brothers. So I got to walk onto the set of Blake Edwards' The Great Race while they were shooting the iceberg sequence with antique cars on the iceberg, and Jack Lemmon, Tony Curtis, and Natalie Wood all there on this iceberg in this huge tank of water, and fans going for a storm scene, and wave machines. It was the eyes just popped right out of my head. I thought as a kid, at 8 years old, I thought if they were going to shoot on an iceberg, they would have to go up and find an iceberg somewhere. I had no idea this was being created on a soundstage in Hollywood. And so that just like blew my mind. The other thing, we went into another stage where they were shooting a forced perspective model of a mansion up on a hill. And in the scene, a wing of the mansion blows up. And so they had this model that was about 4 feet high, and they had men, up on the top of the hill putting up the chimney and stuff. So I could see the perspective of, how big the house was or how small it was. And then you come down this hill, and then in the foreground, they have full-size fence and gate, and they dressed an actor to play a policeman who was walking by on the sidewalk. So you'd have this full-scale foreground, and then the hill would go up, and there's this house that's right there. I mean, it's not that far away. And I was like, that is not going to look right. Nobody's going to buy that. It's going to look like a model house. And then, of course, when I saw the film, I saw that it truly worked. It looked totally real. And so, just learning the whole concept of forced perspective was, again, mind-blowing for a kid at 8 years old. And then we went on another stage where they were shooting a film called Two on a Guillotine that starred Dean Jones and Connie Stevens, and was being directed by William Conrad, who later is an actor who did this Canon series and some other things. And they were doing a rear screen projection scene where Connie Stevens and Dean Jones were sitting in like a chairlift kind of thing, a bubble. And they had a rear screen that was showing them, rising up in the air, and they're just sitting there. And again, it was just learning actually witnessing how they do this magic was just mind-blowing. And I just want to throw in there, meeting Connie Stevens, and literally 50 years later, I directed her daughter, Jolie Fisher, who is Carrie Fisher's half-sister, in a thriller called, Fatal Acquittal for Lifetime. And so, it was just like, you talk about bizarre timing and everything, but literally 50 years later, I was directing her daughter in a thriller. So, but anyway, going back to that day in 1964, that was the day I decided that I had to be a director. And my dad had an 8mm home movie camera, and I just took it out of his hand and never gave it back. And when we got home, I was making, little 8mm Dracula movies with my brother as Dracula with a black beach towel on for a cape and, ketchup and plastic fangs and, the whole bit. And I grew up, on famous Monsters of Filmland magazine and watching horror films on Shock Theater on TV, and then getting my dad to book. He would play a lot of these films anyway at his theaters, but I would get him to book Saturday morning matinees, kid matinees with horror movies, when I would bring in all the Vincent Price classics and the Hammer film, the Draculas and Frankensteins with Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing.
And it reminds me of Creature Features, because every Friday night, Bob Wilkins.
Yep. Well, unfortunately, our local station, they called it Shock Theater, and they had that same package of films that were syndicated. But they were so low budget, they didn't have a horror host. So I didn't get to grow up with a horror host. I'm just so depressed about that, because so many other, markets around the country had their local horror hosts it was all started with Vampira in the 50s. And then, of course, in recent, decades, it was Elvira and Svengoolie and all of these. But no, we didn't get to have our local horror host.
Oh my gosh. And it's so interesting how, again, you grew up and you kept on doing it. Now, was your first love, you would say, directing?
Yes. I mean, from the age of 8, I was a one-track mind. That's all I wanted to do, was to direct movies. And particularly, I loved horror films growing up. I loved all genres, and I still do. But something about horror films just really spoke to me. And as a closeted gay man, I realized, years later. My favorite film of all time is Bride of Frankenstein, and I always had an affinity for all the Frankenstein movies. And I realized as an adult that it's the outsider. It's the concept of the outsider. You know, the Frankenstein monster was never a monster to me. He was just a misunderstood freak of nature, like I was.
Well, and what's so amazing there is, I mean, I have to say, one of my top 3 favorite movies is Gods and Monsters, and you produced that.
Well, yes. And that was a dream come true. And to be able, we had a flash. For those who don't know, Sir Ian McKellen plays James Whale in the movie, who is the director.
The best performance ever.
Yes. Oh, I know. He should have won the Oscar, and he was nominated, and he should have won it. Damn it! It did win the Oscar for Best Screenplay. Bill Condon adapted the book by Christopher Brand, and it was fantastic. And we were so thrilled about that. And especially for a low-budget art film to win an Oscar was just unbelievable. Just incredible. Just the whole thing was just a dream come true.
Lights, sound.
Okay for sound.
Action.
The Bride of Frankenstein. A man with a legendary career behind him.
Who's this new yard man?
Mr. Boom might I thought something big.
He came cheap.
A man with his life still ahead of him.
Hey, the master wants to know if you're free for lunch.
I do have a lawn this afternoon. I'm free until then.
Expect nothing fancy.
Come in, Mr. Boom.
Separated by class.
Are you famous?
I was merely a director. You have the most architectural skull. Have you ever sat for an artist?
By time.
You were a soldier.
I was an officer in the trenches.
And by desires.
All I know is bugger. He's a bugger.
Does that surprise you?
I'm not, you know.
I did not think you were bugger too.
They have nothing in common.
Mr. Clayton Boone, my gardener. He's never met a princess, only queens.
Except their humanity.
I've spent much of my life outrunning the past. And now it floods all over me.
I'm losing my mind. Every day a new piece of it goes, and soon there'll be none of it left.
My condition will continue to deteriorate until the end of my life.
Why are you here? Let's get this straight. What did you want from me?
What do you want?
Just back from the hospital already. You're chasing after boys.
Oh, shut up.
Man's gonna make up his life alone.
A philosopher.
Thoreau, with a lawnmower.
Do you believe people come into our lives for a purpose?
To a new world of gods and monsters.
So, we understand each other.
Live and let live.
So for those who don't know, Sir Ian McKellen played James Whale, who was the director of Frankenstein, The Bride of Frankenstein, The Invisible Man, The Old Dark House, and Showboat. What? Yeah, he did other genres, and was this incredible director back in the 30s and 40s. And he was as openly gay as you could possibly be in those days. And it was quite a trailblazer. And when you look at Bride of Frankenstein with the idea of looking for gay subtext, it is loaded with it. And the character of Dr. Polidori is played by Ernest Thesiger, and the character is this very effeminate, mad scientist who grows little miniature people in jars, and his whole performance is very flamboyant and considered one of the first open, kind of gay characters in a mainstream movie. And so anyway, when seeing that film as a kid, it just spoke to me in all sorts of ways that I didn't even realize. And then, of course, later, when I found out about the gay subtext and that James Whale was gay, and all these other things. It just completely blew my mind, and I really realized that it was speaking to me subliminally in so many ways. But getting to do Gods and Monsters, there is a scene, a flashback scene, where James Whale is seen on the set of Bride of Frankenstein in the laboratory directing that movie. And that was the most dream come true moment, to be able to recreate that set at Lacey Studios, downtown LA. And we managed to track down some of the real original electrical equipment that was designed and built by Kenneth Strickfaden for Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein. And Mel Brooks had found it and used it in Young Frankenstein. So, it's appeared in other films. Yeah. And but we got a hold of it, and so the authenticity of that scene just was enough to make the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. It was a dream come true, and Bill Condon did just a freaking amazing job directing it, and his career took off to incredible heights after that, and it was just a dream project for sure.
I mean, Bill, he's I see. I when I think of certain people like Bill Condon, I can't get the words out, because it's when I see a good movie too that I'm like quiet afterwards, because I'm just taking it all in.
Yeah.
Again, that film, and to hear your stories of it just gives me more excitement, because again, I can watch that movie and I still cry. I mean, I'm thinking of it now when he's just the emotions that he went through, Ian, and because interesting, because a friend of mine years ago happened to commit suicide. So when I was watching this performance of his, I was breathtaking, because he had so many levels in it, and it was so beautiful and so beautifully filmed. And the music, I played the soundtrack in my car as I drove around the city.
By Carter Burwell, who's the most amazing composer, just a beautiful score. Yeah, no, it's I'm sorry about your friend.
Thank you.
It is a very, very moving film, and it was interesting because it was the first time I had met Ian, to work on that film. And we all thought, here comes this great Shakespearean actor. This was before he had done Lord of the Rings and all these very big commercial films. And, we didn't know what to expect. And we also had Brendan Fraser in the cast, and we kind of expected Brendan to be, he had done George of the Jungle and some of these comedies and things. We figured he would be, a laugh riot on the set, and Ian McKellen would be a very dramatic actor. And it was sort of the opposite. Ian was the jokester, and Brendan was so intimidated to be working with such an incredibly great actor that he was constantly studying his lines and, nervous and, wanted to be, to live up to being able to hold his own with Ian in those scenes. And so he was very quiet and, and would be in his trailer, preparing, whereas Ian would be on set, making jokes, and, Bill would have to say, Ian, we're ready to go. And he'd say, but the punchline, darling, was and action. And then he would snap into like that. I mean, it was incredible to watch, because he can turn it on on a dime. It was amazing.
Yeah.
And it was really exciting to see him in action, and and it's not to say he was taking it lightly at all. He just was so prepared and so relaxed and so professional that he just was in it. Was when you needed him to be, and it was relaxing for him to come out of it between takes. Not all actors are that way. Some actors have to be method and stay in character the whole day and all that. And that's totally fine. And that's the way they work. Great. But Ian, he had a good time, and he wanted to balance it between takes by, having fun.
Wow. And were you, since you had grown up loving these films, how did this film come about? I mean, did you say, "Hey, let's do this film," or was somebody else doing it and you said?
Well, it was. It started. I read the book "Father of Frankenstein" by Christopher Bram. That was the name of it originally.
Yeah.
And I got the book because it was about James Whale, and I was excited to read it. And I just loved the book. And I got a hold of the author. I didn't know him, but I called up Chris. And I got his number, called him up, and I said, "Hey, I don't have any money, but I'd love to option your book for nothing for like 3 months and see if I can get it going." And he said, "Well," because of course I wanted to direct it, and he said, "Well, a guy named Bill Condon just beat you to the punch a couple weeks ago," and Bill had done the same thing. And I had actually met Bill a couple times at the actress Nancy Allen's house. Now, I got to know Nancy because I was Brian De Palma's assistant back in the days of Dress to Kill and The Fury and home movies and all of that. And so I had worked with Nancy back then. I had also directed Nancy in a Showtime thriller called Acting on Impulse. And so I would go to her parties, and she knew Bill because she had been in one of Bill's films, and Bill had written another one of her films. And so I had just met him casually that way through her parties. And so as soon as the author mentioned his name, I'm like, "Oh, call Nancy. I'll get Bill's number. I'll call him, congratulate him," which is what I did. And then I said to Bill, I said, "Have you thought of Ian McKellen for the role?" And he said, "Oh man, we're on the same wavelength. I just sent him a copy of the book, and I'm hoping that he'll respond to it and agree to attach himself to the project." And I said, "Well, listen, if there's anything I can do to help, I'm just such a fan of the book and everything about James Whale and everything. I just wish you the best of luck." And he said, "Well, it's going to take me, it'll probably be a year of me writing the script, and it's not going to happen for a while, but and so we just kind of didn't talk for a long time, and I figured he was working on it. Okay, then I was at a production company called Region Entertainment. They are also Here TV, which is the gay network, and Paul Collishman was the head of it, and I'd actually known Paul because Paul had prior to that been head of IRS Media, which was Miles Copeland's company, a division of IRS Records, and they were making films. And my very first feature that I directed, Guilty as Charged, was one of their projects. So anyway, I'm at where Paul has landed at a new production company called Region Entertainment, and I'm prepping a film that I had written and was going to direct called Kiss of a Stranger that ended up starring Mariel Hemingway, Diane Cannon, David Carradine, Corbin Burnson. And I heard Paul in the hallway mention Father of Frankenstein. And I jumped up out of my chair, went out in the hall. I said, what? And he goes, "Oh yeah, there's this guy named Bill Condon. He's submitted a script. He has Ian McKellen attached, and we're considering making the movie." And I'm like, "You have to make the movie, and I have to work on it." And Paul was like, "Well, we've been having meetings on it, and my only concern is that are people going to perceive it as kind of a dirty old gay man who's after a young, hot, straight guy, and is it going to seem a little on the sleazy side or whatever?" And I said, "Just wait till tomorrow." And I went home and I had a huge file of all the reviews of the book, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times book review, all these, very classy reviews that were all raves. And I put it on his desk and I said, "Read these reviews and tell me if any of them came to the same worries or same conclusion that you had." Of course, none of them did. And that helped Paul, kind of assuage his concerns that, no, this could really be a great art film. And I don't know how much my doing that helped, but it certainly didn't hurt. And I kept badgering and bugging them about it, what's going on with it and everything. And then they finally did get the financing together, and I got to be the co-executive producer and was there on set every day. And I got David Skall, who's a very well-known historian and an author of many, many books on horror films, to come in and help me co-direct a behind-the-scenes making of, and we interviewed everyone we could find who had known James Whale, who was still alive. One of them being oh my God, my brain. The woman who played the oldest lady in Titanic, who was the star of The Invisible Man and Old Dark House. Gloria Stewart. Good Lord, I can't believe I couldn't remember her name. How embarrassing. Anyway, we interviewed Gloria Stewart, who now is no longer with us, but at the time we were making the movie, she was still with us and had the most wonderful stories of James Whale. It was fantastic. And we also interviewed Curtis Harrington, who knew Whale quite intimately, I think very intimately. And and Curtis was the director of films like Who Slew Auntie Roo and What's the Matter with Helen, and was a director in his own right, but kind of considered Whale to be a mentor of him from the younger days. And so we were working on that while the filming was going on, and it was just everything about that project was a dream come true.